Money Talks features market makers and leaders within the world of rare collectibles, currency, alternative assets, finance, and everything in between. Join the conversation and take a deep dive into the mind of some of the world's most impactful guests to share their strategies and lessons to dominate their respective fields. Hosted by legendary sports executive, entrepreneur, and investor, David Meltzer. This is Money Talks, presented by Stack's Bowers Galleries. We have some amazing guests coming up, but first, let me introduce you to our host, David Meltzer. David Meltzer grew up poor with a dream of buying his mom a house and a car. Within 9 months of graduating law school, David became a millionaire and achieved that dream. After becoming a multi-millionaire, he then lost over $100 million and built it back to run the most notable sports agency in the world. Considered one of the top esports entrepreneurs and investors, David is also a 3-time international best-selling author, a top 100 business coach, and the host of the Top Entrepreneur Podcast, The Playbook. His life's mission is to empower over 1 billion people to be happy. This simple yet powerful mission has led him on an incredible journey to provide one thing: value. Coming up on this episode of Money Talks, presented by Stack's Bowers Galleries, Buster Scher and Nat Turner. Buster Scher was born and raised in New York. He is a multi-talented entrepreneur known for his involvement in the basketball industry as the founder of Hoops Nation and host of The Buster Show. Buster Scher has worked with many companies since 2017, the most prominent being his experience working for the NBA for close to 5 years as a show host, allowing him to create Hoops Nation, a social media outlet focused on sports, specifically geared towards basketball.
Welcome to Money Talks. I'm David Meltzer. Live in my studio, I have someone I haven't met in person. He's amazing, Buster Scher. He is the founder of Hoops Nation and, ironically, The Buster Show. Welcome, brother.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
I am so happy to have you because, in the collectible space, let's just say a lot of the people are a little bit seasoned, like myself. Sure. And so to get some young energy in here, a young voice, I know you've been even notably recognized as one of the most important voices under 30, which I love because I'm not only a sports guy, but I'm a money guy, a philanthropy guy, and to see the younger generation really take a hold of a mission and a purpose with their content makes a big difference, because Buster does not stand in front of cars he doesn't own, houses he's leasing with a whole bunch of ridiculous nonsense. He's providing content and help for a variety of reasons. So I wanted to start about having a purpose at a young age. What is the mission of all the extraordinary content that you're providing?
Well, first off, it's very kind of you to say. My mom would definitely appreciate all of those things.
Since I'm her age, I'm glad.
It all starts with just finding your passion, right? So for me, originally it was basketball, and then I was at a point where I was a poor student, so I had to figure out, okay, how do I turn this into a business that can sustain me doing my own thing, making stuff that's of value to other people, and doing fun things, having as much fun as possible, as fast as possible. So for me, that was launching a basketball media platform, which eventually turned into Hoops Nation. And then it took a bunch of twists and turns in broadcasting and podcasting and launching other channels and making content around collectibles and collecting, buying, selling, investing, all those sorts of things, and sort of led me to where I am today.
And getting involved in collecting is one thing, but one thing I've learned also about the collectibles business is you have to have a community.
Sure.
So let's start with how you got interested in collecting and how that's moved and grown as you built a community of over 1 million people.
It started with baseball cards growing up, like a lot of people. You start usually with sports cards because you're a sports fan to grow up.
Was it basketball cards specifically?
It was baseball cards, then basketball cards.
Okay,
I thought I was going to be a pro baseball player when I was younger. It's funny, the reason I actually leaned into basketball, and I haven't talked about this too much, but it's because of the league rights policies. I would have probably launched Baseball Nation, but the league at that time didn't really support that sort of thing.
Right.
Whereas the NBA, as you know, has some of the best policies, and that's why they're doing the best, content-wise of basically any league on the planet.
It's so smart. What was the group called that used to be like the Gestapo of digital rights, the MLB?
Yeah, it's basically what it was.
Yeah, it was.
They just shut everything down.
Like I did a giveaway at Angel Stadium, and it was like more legal nuisance than it was worth. And all I was trying to do was give away a $25 Dave & Buster's card for the first digital giveaway at MLB. But the digital rights jumped all over us.
They're doing better now. Everybody's come around.
Well, they have to, or they'd be gone.
Exactly. But that's what it was like then. But started with baseball cards, then into basketball cards, and then eventually I started to explore other areas, everything from historical signatures to type 1 photos to animation art to, all the things I'm into now. But that, progression was over 10 years. It took me 10 years of buying and selling baseball and basketball cards and collecting. And then, in 2018 or 19, starting to talk about that to my community, being like, okay, this is, an interesting way to sort of play sports, right? This was at a funny time where, the industry wasn't nearly as big as it is now. And, buying a Giannis rookie card for $1 was an interesting way to bet on his career, right? And just have fun collecting and, supporting that player in addition to buying his jersey or buying a signed basketball or buying, whatever else you would as a fan. After doing all that, then I started to explore other areas. I started, especially after the card industry blew up during COVID, it got to a point where I was like, okay, it's time to look at some other interesting areas. And that led me first, really, to probably something you wouldn't expect out of a 22-year-old, which is Abraham Lincoln and George Washington documents from their presidency, which is where I landed straight from basketball cards. And I was just studying the market. It was a lot of older people, and I think about collectibles in the same way I would think about like what you do for work, right? What you do for fun, what you do for work is going to determine a lot of who you spend time around. If I'm buying Lincolns and Washingtons, do I want to spend time with the other sorts of people who are buying Lincolns and Washingtons? Because if I have, one of the rarest Abraham Lincoln or George Washington documents, that puts me at that, poker table, if you will, of like the other people that own those documents. And I thought that was really interesting.
What type of people buy Lincoln and Washington documents? I'm just curious. People with
a lot of money that love history.
Good.
Yeah.
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 So it's all ages, though. It's just rich people who love history.
Yeah, who are generally much older.
Yeah. They are. Well, it's harder to get rich at a young age. I know people think it's, a great probability that, especially today with technology, that more younger people are rich than older people. But it's an anomaly. There's still, even entrepreneurship runs from, the most successful entrepreneurs are 45 to 55.
Makes sense.
And yet most people would think your age group has the most successful entrepreneurs.
Well, social media misleads people.
Surprisingly.
Because a lot of people lie, and there's no such thing as like a true fact checker on social media. So people lie. It's like, okay, I'm a billionaire, and then you're like, ooh, he's a billionaire at age 22? No, I'm not. But there's no fact checkers, so that stuff tends to go viral, and then people think something that's not true. But
so it's interesting because, like, even with Bored Apes, right? A lot of people, including I, like, the only reason I was interested in that NFT was to have a seat at the table.
Sure.
Right, because the only one that could afford that, right? I wanted to be in that, what I call frequency. Your frequency is your neighborhood, right? I want to be in that neighborhood. And here you are going the other direction, at a young age. You're trying to go the other way, buying Washington and Lincoln documents while I'm buying Bored Apes, right? Like, it's just so screwy. Yeah. But we both have the exact same objective in mind.
Totally.
Right? I want to be with the rich kids, and you want to be with the rich old men.
That's one way to put it. But, I also love it, and I love the history. And one of my favorite documents is George Washington basically admitting that he was in debt. When he was in his early 20s, around my age, he bought basically more land than he could afford, so he had to sell bonds to his friends to cover those debts. And I have a bond receipt that Washington wrote, one of two, I believe. The other one's at the Smithsonian.
Wow.
And that history. I mean, come on. It speaks so highly that somebody in his early 20s who was in debt, could go on to be the first president of the United States. And
still true, by the way, not to be the first president, but that's what makes America so great, right?
Yeah.
You can have kids in their 20s screw everything up, or guys in their 30s screw everything up like me, and still be the richest person on earth or the president of the United States or whatever they want to be. So I'm a huge American history nut, but also supporter of America, even today with all the issues that we may have. Totally. There's no other place on earth that you can do what you do here with the opportunities. One more thing about history, I study history because it helps me learn human nature, and human nature never changes, and collectibles has a lot to do with human nature.
Sure.
Buying and selling, the emotional aspect, the supply and demand. There's a lot of scarcity itself as a human attribute or nature. What are some of the things that you've learned, because you are a history buff, I can tell.
Yeah.
What are some more on the human nature side of things that you've learned beyond, hey, this guy could be in debt and still make anything that he wants? That's one thing, the idea of pursuing your potential, which ironically is what the Declaration of Independence eventually was talking about in his later life was, hey, this is a country, if you have faith, you can pursue your potential.
The things that collectibles bring you, everything from coins to animation art to type 1 photos, all the things that we all love, it can teach you how to interact with people because you're buying and selling, you're doing those negotiations. It can introduce you to other like-minded people, so like buying the seat at the table. It can teach you history. It can teach you investing. It can teach you patience. I mean, it can literally teach you everything. That's why I love collecting.
And yet you didn't do well in school.
I was a terrible student. I'm super dyslexic.
I love
ADHD, like bouncing all over the walls and stuff.
What drives me crazy, bro, I hate to interrupt again, but I have to. It drives me crazy even with my own kids, who get good grades, by the way. But they determine how smart someone is by the grades they get. And I keep on telling people, because I had hyper academic siblings, that there's a difference between a good student and someone that's smart or intelligent, intuitive, or inspired. I'm hiring for intelligence, inspiration, and intuition. But go ahead. So here you have all these different aspects that you learn through collectibles.
Those things can teach you anything, right? They help me in my other businesses. They help me in the collectibles business. They open my eyes to, being able to see when there's an opportunity and strike on it, and, have fun too. I'm all over the collecting spectrum when it comes to that, right? Like I collect everything from Abraham Lincoln and George Washington documents to like ancient Greek and Roman coins to, the biggest thing that I've been collecting over the last year, and this will, depending on when this releases, this might be the first time I mention it. I've been buying the original art from the first season of SpongeBob.
Oh, nice.
Because only the first season was hand-painted. The average demographic that, grew up watching it hasn't, gotten to a point where they have significant capital. And it's, the most popular meme on the internet because the age demo that grew up watching it now runs the internet, basically. And only the first season was hand-painted, so after that it was all digital. So, it's scarce. And more people know who lives in a pineapple under the sea than who the president is,
That's
on a global scale, which is pretty funny.
Maybe he has more power than the president.
SpongeBob?
Yeah.
Maybe, who knows?
I have a hand drawing of Dr. Seuss, so.
Those are great.
Yeah, very similar.
I love character drawings.
Now, public speaking.
Sure.
One of the things that I noticed the first time that you and I interacted in an interview was you had an extraordinary capability of communication. And I could see how that transfers over to public speaking beyond the interviewing and the commentary and the conversations that I've seen you have, which are extremely articulate and intelligent. Where have you found the difference in public speaking? I coach a lot of the world's best speakers. I travel the world now, and that's mostly what I'm doing is speaking.
That's awesome.
And I'm always amazed with people at your age that have not only the comfort, but the capability of speaking. What are some of the things you see in public speaking that are different than the virtual conversations that you're normally having?
Well, yeah, I had sort of a weird upbringing in the sense that I thought I was going to be a broadcaster, right?
And a professional baseball player.
And a professional baseball
exactly.
player. And
so
the president.
Buster's up to bat.
All these different things I would have struck out because I wasn't even a good Little League player.
Oh, nice.
But the reason that I started doing broadcasting, and it's funny that you say that, is because I didn't make my JV basketball team as a sophomore.
Nice. You and Michael Jordan. That's perfect.
I didn't go on to be Michael Jordan, obviously. That didn't work out. But I did go on to broadcast the high school basketball team, and I won best in the country when I was like 17 for high school broadcasting. Not much competition, but it still sounds cool.
Yeah, it does.
And then I went on to do stuff with the NBA and with this league called the Crew League, which is rappers and their entourages playing basketball against each other. It gets a bunch of views on YouTube. That taught me so much about interviewing. It taught me so much about public speaking because in an essence, it is. You have to be perfect. You cannot miss a call. Some of my favorite public speakers are broadcasters like Mike Breen, who I've interviewed, and he can't miss a call. When he's doing the NBA Finals and LeBron or Steph Curry hits a dagger 3 at the end of the game, he has to nail that. Everything. The whole world is on the line. The moment only happens once. And that's sort of how I think about public speaking. When you're talking about something that you're super passionate about, and there's a crowd actively listening, and you're like fired up on stage, and like there's a special feeling that you get when you're talking in front of a crowd.
Are you a middle child?
Oldest.
Oh, okay.
Oldest.
Good.
But
a lot of times that middle child that loves it like I do.
Yeah?
Yeah, like my mom's like, why do you still do all that stuff? I'm like, I don't know, I just like the attention.
That's funny. But yeah, it showed me really how to be a decent public speaker, to know how to perform under pressure, really, in those moments.
I have my kids all involved in the buying and selling aspect, and collectibles, I think at its core, are probably the easiest and best way to teach perceived value and bottom line, how to walk away from the deal, how to extract your emotions from an opportunity, but most importantly, and you may know this as one of my taglines, right? How to be more interested than interesting, because the best collectors in the world are definitely more interested. They've done their research about George Washington or Abe Lincoln to even know that there are only 2 of these, or the stories, as you well know, are so important in collectibles that if you may have a collectible, but if you don't know the stories around it, you've lessened the value of that collectible. So for you, what's one piece of advice that you've learned in buying and selling from the collectibles business?
Well, the story is everything. And with that, I can give you a fun story. So I just bought this note from Stax Bowers. It's a Mona Lisa to Colonis in 1931, Costa Rica. Put Mona Lisa's face on a $2 note. Nobody really knows why they did it. Oftentimes the reason that like presidents and historical figures and famous people are on notes is to like instill confidence in that community, because like, oh, I have George Washington in my pocket, that, he's a powerful figure, that should instill confidence in the country, right? But Mona Lisa wasn't famous when Mona Lisa was made. There were talks. Da Vinci was a very famous artist, but objectively speaking, Mona Lisa is obviously not Da Vinci's best work. He has giant works that are 20 times the size and 100 times the intricate detail. But why is Mona Lisa, estimated to be valued at $5-10 billion, more than the GDP of certain countries? It's because of the story. Mona Lisa was stolen in the early 1900s from where it was on the wall at the Louvre, and it was on the wall with a dozen other paintings. But it was stolen, and the entire country, the entire world was looking for this painting. They got it back, now it has its own wall, and it's the most famous work ever. That story is why the Mona Lisa is so valuable, not because of the artistry, but because of the story and the rarity and the character and the provenance. It's a lot of things, and that it teaches that, like, individual example. I could give you 100 in every collectible category.
So how do you go beyond the story to buy or sell at the right price, right? Obviously, a lot of times someone may not know the whole story, and you do, so there would be an advantage in the negotiation where somebody doesn't know all the information because they're not more interested than interesting. Do you have some set rules of negotiation when you're buying and selling?
Well, it depends on what the item is, right? There are marketplaces now that exist where you can go on and see what things last sold for and when, and you can compare it to other things, and there are grading systems that scale things so you can more easily compare each individual item. But, with one-of-one items, you have to try to compare it to another one-of-one item. And if you're selling it, you have to tell the story as well as possible to make it as unique as possible, which by default, if you or I am passionate about said item, hopefully it is. And that has to be a point when buying it. Like when I'm looking at what to buy, I want the thing that is most unique, that is the coolest, that is George Washington, or the highest grade Abraham Lincoln signature, or the moment where SpongeBob delivers pizza, which I love. Like all those different things. it has to be special on both ends. But there are tools for like comparing prices so you don't get screwed over or anything.
Yeah,
like that.
Stacks and Bowers does a lot of that as well to help people in the system and the value justification behind what they're doing.
Yeah, Stacks is like a 20-year plus, giant database of every price ever of every single item on a consistent basis that you can just go look at. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
And the Bowers books also give you a history, beyond history books, which is also a value. And you bring so much value, real value, quantitative value, as well as perceived value. The bottom line here at Stacks Bowers is we have the incredible Buster Scher here on Money Talks.
I'm excited to hear from our next guest, Nat Turner. Nat Turner is the CEO of Collectors, a holding company focused on the collectibles industry. Before Collectors, he was co-founder and CEO of Flatiron Health, a technology company focused on the oncology industry. Flatiron Health's mission is to improve lives by learning from the experience of every cancer patient.
Welcome to Money Talks. I'm David Meltzer, and I am super excited because entrepreneurs, they are at the key essence of collecting. And this guy started as just an entrepreneur. Now he has one of the most successful collecting businesses in the world. He's the CEO of the Collectors himself, Nat Turner. Welcome to Money Talks.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start there because I mentor a lot of entrepreneurs. I've been an entrepreneur so far back that when I told people I was an entrepreneur, they thought I was a waiter. It was kind of like being an actor. Now, thanks to Gary and Tom and Ed and some of my friends, they knit capes for entrepreneurs like you, which is extraordinary. But there are some key characteristics of entrepreneurs that lend itself to collecting. And so someone like you who has built over $1 billion business in the collectibles space, but previous to that had early success as a Forbes 30 under 30, a Fortune 40 under 40. There has to be some key characteristics of not just entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs who collect.
Mm-hmm. I'd say the biggest, when you're an entrepreneur, you have to obsess over whatever it is you're doing. I stay up till I'm like most entrepreneurs, 2 or 3 in the morning doing emails, talking to customers. Collecting is no different. You have to have a obsession over what you collect, a passion for it. I collected everything as a kid. Cards, coins, Beckett magazines, comic books, all sorts of stuff. And when you're an entrepreneur, it's the same DNA. And also for me, collecting's my therapy. So after a long day of work, put the kids down, have dinner, catch up with my wife for an hour. I'm on the computer scanning cards, looking at eBay, 2 or 3 hours every day as well. And it's my ability to think. I go dark for a little while and just play with baseball cards. So
there's one thing in your marriage to have your own separate relaxation, or I call it non-time event that you're passionate about. But I always found, because I collect as well and I have 4 children, that there seems to be a conflict or some invasion time with my kids now in my collecting, because they either want to participate with me or want me to do something else other than the time that I spend collecting. Are your kids old enough? Have you experienced any of the non-time invasion?
I have a card room, and it's no kids allowed unless daddy says it's okay.
Yeah.
The door will be closed. My kids are 7 and 5. They're still very young, and I'm slowly exposing cards to them and other collectibles. For my daughter, it's less cards, it's more dolls and things, which is great. That's a collecting thing as well. My son likes cards, and so he now comes into the card room and asks to help organize. I'll give him a bunch of unsorted, a set from 1975 Topps, all PSA graded, and I'll say, hey, they're all out of order. I'll pay you $1 if you will put them in, 1 through 700, or in that case, 660, order. And, he gets a kick out of it, just trying to expose the cards to him. And so, knock on wood, hopefully, 15, 20 years from now, it's something they both enjoy.
There's a lot of nuances of entrepreneurship as well. You've had several successful exits. You're able to raise money. And a lot of people, when they think about collecting, they don't think about it with a big enough perspective. And you seem to, since you have graduated Wharton, had a really big picture, a big self-image. How important do you think that has been as a mindset to lead you to being CEO of Collectors and to have over $1 billion valuation in your company?
Being an entrepreneur, you can't be, you have to be a positive thinker and believe
Optimist,
something.
I call it.
Right, yeah, you have to believe something can happen. It is not, for the faint of heart. You really do need to, will it and believe it. And that's even more so when you're starting something from scratch. Collectors, I didn't start. It started actually the year I was born. So by definition, it was pretty hard to start it. But
yeah, that's good.
We've done a lot since we bought the company in 2020. But it's been a really fun 2021. Excuse me. It's been a really fun journey. But my entrepreneurial endeavors have been. It's not always up. A lot of the startups, the two that we sold, that did well, my business partner and I from before. I can count 5 or 10 times in each company where, one day I thought it was
last dollar.
Yeah, last dollar, or, I don't know if we're going to make it. And then, if you think positively, and you stay up late and work hard and make the right decisions and hire the right people, you can turn it around. And we were lucky to have done that. And then being able to tell a vision to a set of investors, storytelling is important, but you have to be able to back it up and, not getting too ahead of yourself with, the story versus what's reality. In my case, a lot of software design. It's telling a story of what's possible using software and then actually making it happen. Those are two very hard things to do, and we were lucky, to have done it. So.
But you can't articulate quantitative value to exceed what you're asking for unless you're capable of telling a story with credibility, emotional connection, articulating the reasons quantitatively with impact, and then utilizing those capabilities to support the value. And those all seem like attributes of trading, whatever collectible. One of the interesting things is when I look at an entrepreneur with you that has been successful in different industries, careers, and jobs, how do you choose what business to get involved with when it came to collectibles? Because from the Dan Fleischmans of words with cards and coffee to other people with AI grading and a variety of areas that you can be involved with, just brokering, buying and selling.
Yeah.
You seem to really grab onto, with a very big investment, the authenticity side, the verification side of the business. Why was that?
So I'm passionate about cards. It's probably the thing I've been.
If you're spending 2 or 3 hours a night,
yeah.
I would
And by the way, and that's been the case since probably 5 years old.
Nice. So you're good at it too.
Yeah. Well, I've been the 10,000 hour thing. I far exceeded.
Right. By the time you're 9.
Right. So I'm very passionate about it.
Tiger Woods of cards.
I don't know about that. But, so I start with that. And so when I sold my last business, I wanted to do something I cared about next. I was lucky in that regard, and I looked at cards, and it was a very mental leap for me. Cards had always been a passion only, and people like Dan and others had wanted me to get involved in their companies and cards, and I was, no, this is a passion for me, and that's it. And so when I made the mental leap of saying, hey, I might actually want to do something in cards as a job, as a business, I landscaped, the hobby, and frankly, PSA was the most important company in my personal collecting journey when it came to cards. And I made a decision. I said, if I can buy PSA with a group of investors, I couldn't afford the whole thing. It's that or nothing. And that's how I approached it, and talked to a lot of companies. Again, I couldn't get comfortable with anything else. Like it was that or nothing.
Yeah.
And it was a public company, which meant it was all very complicated, and it was COVID. Every company's stock in this world was going up and up and up. But I'm really glad it worked out, because, like I said, to me, the picks and shovels business of authentication, it's the most important thing. If you're buying a card, if you're selling a card, if you're building a set, if you're passing cards on to your kids or whatever, it has to be authenticated. There's too many bad actors in card land, and again, PSA was the most important. So
it's so interesting, because as I went down that breakdown of credibility, emotional connection, reasons, impacts, and capabilities, which are the 5 criteria that I look at just in any business, most people overlook credibility. Whereas if you're 100% credible, which nobody is, but if you are 100% credible, I could tell you, hey, Nat, give me $1 million today, I'll wire you $2 million on Friday. If I was 100% credible, you'd do it. Even if you didn't have it, you find it. And so people discount that credibility. Do you think they consciously are aware of the value of the credibility, for example, in the collectible business of PSA or just grading versus an unconscious competency of, well, there's a brand that guarantees this is real and does it. How do you think people perceive credibility in the collectible space?
I was just talking about this before the show. I mean, we do track this pretty systematically. We call it grade value ratio. It basically means when you look at PSA and you look at our competitive grading services, same card in the same grade across those companies, and we don't publish this, we don't like to speak about our competition too much. We just look at what premium does PSA or discount does PSA sell for relative to our competitors, same card, same grade. And on average, it's more than 2 times.
Wow.
Across the board. And in some cases, it's 5 times. And that's people speaking with their wallets. It's when they're going on eBay or Heritage or wherever. And
real value.
It's real value. They're paying for something at a premium to what they could buy it otherwise. And that means a lot. It means way more to us than anything else is that value ratio. And so we track it every week. We religiously want to improve it. It means we're doing our job better. People trust our opinion. At the end of the day, we're an opinion service. Just like Moody's, just like S&P Global, just like other rating agencies, GIA, et cetera, we're providing a very educated opinion, and we're willing to stand behind our opinion. So that's what we track.
And you bought it that was considered to be the top of the market, and you paid, I think, over $850 million or close to it.
853.
Yeah, to get the deal done. What were some of the things that you were looking at as you did your timing and risk tolerance analysis when you're purchasing something like that others perceived maybe to be at the top? Nobody knew the variance of COVID to the actual valuation of grading because the lines were out the door. I mean, I'm so blessed. I have a Topps card of my first pitch at Angel Stadium.
Oh, nice.
That was PSA graded
Yeah.
before COVID, when it wasn't, lines out the door. Like, we'll get to this in like 2.5 years, David.
Right.
And it was a gift from Topps to me.
That's awesome.
Which now it's probably worth, 2.5 cents instead
Maybe
of 1. Yeah, exactly. I was getting the ratio down. So anybody out there interested, you got a nickel, you're going to give it, because it's 10. It's a 10, by the way. More importantly, though, that's a lot of money, and it's one thing to buy a car at the top of the market. It's another for when so many people perceive that, well, after COVID, who knows what's going to happen. What were some of the things that you were looking at that were making you so bullish in the space?
Yeah, the premium for PSA is one. The team was a huge part of it. I believe cards will be around for a long time. It's not NFTs or things.
Right.
Cards have been around since 1880, earlier even. And we also do coins, and those have been around for a very long time.
Right. Yeah.
So
I'm learning more and more what's been around too.
Those things, they can be ancient. So, you look at the collectibles we rate. Those we believe are categories that are going to be around for a very long time. And at the end of the day, as you said, credibility, trust, and authenticity. When you're buying a house, you get it inspected. When you're buying a car, you check the title and you check its record, right? Anything you buy of value, the most important question is it real? And then in most cases, what condition is it in? Right, and that's, when you go on Kelley Blue Book, you rate the car quality, right?
Yep.
Stocks, similarly, what's its rating? Bonds, same thing. So if you believe in the categories underlying the business, which in our case are trading cards mostly, and coins, currency, we believe in those categories, and then therefore authenticity and trust are going to be needed for a very long time. And we've seen it. The business has continued to grow considerably since we bought the company. We're very proud of the team. The team is, in my opinion, the best at what they do. As far as grading and authenticity, we take it very seriously. We stand behind our grades. We pay out, unfortunately, when we get it wrong, and every mistake we make, it's visible to me as CEO. In fact, and we diagnose and root cause how did we get it wrong, and academically approach improving the system. And now we use software actually to make that much more scalable and consistent.
Yeah, I would think utilizing software and technology is just going to increase as the markers or the indicators can be not only observed digitally but marked digitally as well. Do you see it as a market threat, or is the brand so big that it's just going to enhance the fact that we're just going to have greater margins because it's going to be easier to be right?
You're regarding software and AI and
software
sorts?
And and verification.
Well, I like to think we're also leading the charge at using software and technology for authenticity. We're taking images front and back of every card and every coin before and after we grade them. So we have probably the largest database of unique card images and coin images, which is a huge value.
Yeah.
We can now analyze and revert and reference back to those images in an automated way. So if we see a card come in, the system can actually detect, hey, we've seen this card before. Let's compare now and before. Has the card been altered at all, for example? We can mark things on coins, for example, and say, hey, actually this morning in cards, we discovered for a very rare parallel from the 90s, a counterfeit version, and we finally figured out the tell as to why it's counterfeit.
Yeah.
And it's a $100,000+ card if it's real. And lo and behold, we had another get submitted last week that was on my desk when I showed up today, and we're trying to decide, is it real or not? And we think we figured out the answer. So unfortunately, it was fake.
Wow.
But that's our job, is to protect
Right.
the collector. So I like to think we're leading the charge on software application in this world. I'm sure there are great startups doing innovative things, and it'll keep us on our toes.
Last thing real quick too, and I see this even with the success of my podcast, that there's so much value to the community.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't imagine the data that you get when you're talking about coins, because in cards, not you're just not getting the names, you're getting so much data that no one else has, attributed to teams, leagues, organizations, decades and age. There's so many variables. Is that something that you're tracking as well to create this unbelievable customer database?
It's mainly metadata around the cards. So we're tracking things like dimensions, centering, surface defects. We're tracking how the cut looks like, for example, on a card. 1954 tops versus what does an appropriate kind of manufacturer cut look like versus maybe something that's been sheet cut or trimmed. We're tracking known counterfeits, backdoor cards, bankruptcy cards from when various manufacturers went out of business. It's mainly, I would say, metadata around a card itself. As far as the athletes, the teams and leagues, we certainly have that data.
What about the customer data?
Meaning
The demographics of
who's submitting?
people are submitting.
Sure, yeah,
That'd
we
be
track
really
that.
valuable.
Yeah, we track that. It's actually interesting. So in PSA, it's actually not a huge amount. I mean, it's let's see, it's six figures plus. It's it's 100,000 plus.
Yeah.
Submitters. I mean, we actually have like over 1 million.
It's less than the followers I have.
That's what my point is. On an absolute basis, it's actually very small.
Yeah.
But there are millions of people who actually collect cards, and so you can imagine our opportunity, and I think the opportunity of Fanatics and others with card printing, is growing the hobby on an absolute basis is actually really, really small. If you add 500,000 people into this hobby, it will have a huge impact. And so we're tracking demographics, and it's unfortunately very largely male-dominated card collecting.
Yeah.
Coin collecting is even more so.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to figure out ways to diversify the collecting audience. It's younger, I'll tell you. The card
Which is good.
Card submitters are getting younger and younger. Coin submitters are getting older and older. But
Yeah.
the card submitters are very healthy, I would say. But we could diversify them better, and we're moving international too. Japan, we're opening this summer for card grading.
Well, the sports are globalizing, and as the NFL
Well, that's Pokemon there.
Yeah, we have Pokemon there today, but
Yeah.
when we have the NBA, MLB, and
For
now
sure.
NFL moving that way,
For sure.
it's going to be, I think, really interesting, because as you know, in the e-commerce space, the globalization of any product has its own unbelievable scaling and scoping issues that are incredibly beneficial to the owners of the company and leaders of the company.
Well,
like
the
yourself.
two fastest growing sports for us in America are F1 and soccer.
Thanks
So,
to Netflix.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is wonderful.
The World Cup.
That'll be your next purchase, I'm sure. The incredible Matt Turner, incredible entrepreneur and collector, CEO of Collectors. You're doing a great job, man. It's been an honor to have you. You're finishing out the set from the legacy legends of PSA all to the future of PSA lies in Nat Turner's hand. You can learn about this and so much more here on Money Talks.
Thanks for watching today's episode of Money Talks, presented by Stack's Bowers Galleries. See you next time.